Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad to have you here with us. My name is Holly Hickson, and I'm with the Early Learning team at the Hunt Institute. For the benefit of anyone who may be joining us for the first time today, the Hunt Institute is the creation of our founder and namesake, four-term North Carolina Governor James Hunt. We also serve as an education policy support to governors, state legislators, and other high-level state elected leaders. We cover the full spectrum of educational policy from early childhood through the workforce. Before we begin, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. Later in the hour, we will share some of your questions with the panel. If you would like to contribute a question, please use the Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar. Also, in the chat, we have listed some resources for our resources from our guest speakers today. So if you check the chat for the links as we're speaking, that's where they're located. And then also know that we are closed captioning today, and you can access those settings at the bottom of your screen. Finally, you will be able to find the recording for today's webinar on our YouTube channel within the next few days. Just go to YouTube and search for the Hunt Institute Early Efforts. In our Early Efforts series, we focus on the early childhood portion of this continuum. The pandemic brought to light the primary and secondary trauma experienced by early educators serving families and young children. Several states are focused on early educator well-being. Dr. Kate Gallagher, Director of University of Oklahoma's Early Childhood Institute, will discuss research on educator well-being. Early childhood leaders, Dr. Elissa Bruno, will share her expertise on adverse childhood experiences and how they impact us as adults working with young children, and her podcast, Trauma Survivors Walking Each Other Home, which the link to her podcast is in the chat as we said above. Elissa Bruno is a published author, early childhood advocate, international conference and podcast presenter, former Assistant Attorney General for the state of Maine, and academic dean at the University of Maine, Augusta. Dr. Kate Gallagher is the director and principal investigator of the Early Childhood Education Institute at University of Oklahoma, Tulsa, the George Kaiser Family Foundation Endowed Chair of Early Childhood Education. And I'd like to take our first question to Elissa. You have authored several books on early childhood leadership and administration. What prompted you to write your sixth book, Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, Translating Trauma's History into Healing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Holly. Translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. I've decided that after almost a lifetime of thinking that I had to manage my image and come across as the professional, the attorney, the assistant attorney general, I've decided that my painful past has become my greatest asset. That my abilities that come from being a trauma survivor are well-honed capacities, thanks to a lot of help and a lot of hard work, to be with children and be with adults who've also been traumatized. Now, what inspires me specifically, Holly, is that there's unpublished research that's very powerful that says the majority of early childhood professionals are ourselves trauma survivors. Minimum of 58%. And anecdotally, around the country and actually around the world, 80 to 100% of us are trauma survivors. So what does that mean to the profession? Well, number one, it means that I need to look at my whole self holistically and say, do I have to leave all of that trauma history at the door and pretend that I have no trauma? When I see a child who's running or screaming or biting, I need to be aware of two things. One, how is that triggering me? So I can be present to that child, but more importantly, not equally importantly, what's going on inside of me. So I wrote that book because I wanted to be clear with people that even those of us who came from the perfect family, many of us are traumatized, and I'm okay with owning that I am a survivor of severe trauma. I'm going to say it, and if I'm troubling to people, I'll try to say this as truthfully and as honestly as I can. I'm a survivor. I was beaten so that I blacked out. My father was a narcissist and unable to see anyone else beside himself. My mother tried, but she was psychotic. So I was raised by a person hello, Ashley, raised by a person with mental illness and another one with narcissistic personality disorder. Why am I saying that? Because there are other people in our profession that have similar issues. And as Kate and I just discussed with Holly, we feel often in early childhood that we're being held to a standard of perfectionism. I did. I came from another profession. I came from the law, and I felt like, well, I've got to get everything just right. And it was easy for coming from the law because I could manage all of that stuff. But relationships aren't so easy to manage, especially when the issue is with me. And so I wrote that book in sum to be honest with people, everybody, and also especially early childhood people, to say, wait a minute, our painful past can be our greatest asset. And another quote that I love is, take your broken heart and turn it into art. That's what I'm here to encourage people to do, starting with myself.
Thank you so much, Elissa. Thank you. Dr. Gallagher, in 2022, while at the Buffett Early Childhood Institute at the University of Nebraska, you published Early Childhood Professional Well-Being, an Ecological Framework with Dr. Amy Roberts. What impact has this research had at the state level in policies regarding early educator well-being?
Thank you, Holly. I just want to stop by saying I love that. Take what's happened to your heart and make it art. Yeah, I like that. Just want to take a moment again with that. So Amy Roberts and our team at Buffett and I had been talking with Head Start and early Head Start teachers about their experiences and how they were doing before the pandemic. I had the privilege of working with Robert Whitaker, who was one of the earliest people to think about asking early childhood teachers, how are you? And how are you doing? Instead of what's wrong with you and what do you need to do better, right? And so as a point of really examining what the adults caring for young children professionally need, he thought it was important to see how they were doing. And he found, and we also found, that teachers of young children were frequently experiencing depression and anxiety. We found also, Holly, Elissa, that early childhood teachers in the samples we worked with were actually had experienced childhood trauma, ACEs, in higher proportions than the general population estimates. And we need to be careful. We don't want to tell a story that early childhood professionals are more likely to have mental health issues. That we don't want that to be our narrative. But my guess is that, and we didn't ask them this, my guess is that they were working with children to save their childhoods. And actually, I did some work in grad school where I interviewed early childhood, long-term, excellent, high reputation early childhood teachers about why they cared for children for a living, when it's so counterintuitive. You can't make a good living. You enter retirement with very little to show for it financially, and you often don't have benefits that the general population has. And all three of them told me stories of healing, stories of working with young children as a part of helping children to be well and healing their own childhoods. And so, while it's certainly not everyone's narrative, it's a narrative. And so when the pandemic hit, people were scrambling to see what was needed. What do programs need to stay open? The first concern. What do programs need to stay open? What do closed programs need to still educate children and to still care for families? And one of the last questions people were asking is, how are the educators? How are the people doing who are doing the caregiving for very low wages? 75% of the people we interviewed did not have health insurance that paid for by their employer or even covered by their employer. 75% of them did not have paid time off. We were in the midst of a pandemic. We were in the midst of a very severe health threat. And if they got it, by the way, from the children they were caring for or their families quite often, if they contracted COVID-19, they couldn't take time off and get paid. Directors were worried about teachers coming in sick because they weren't going to get paid and they didn't have health care. So we exposed a situation that existed before the pandemic. Be very clear, we have neglected and held early childhood professionals to a standard of professional behavior and preparedness for generations without making sure that the systems were in place to help them be well and to do their jobs well. We have built the early childhood system on their backs. And the pandemic exposed that, exposed the vulnerability of not just the professionals who were doing the work, working hard, but exposed the vulnerability of the entire system. So those are just a few of the things that we found. And I think the biggest message was, when in times of difficulty, ask people how they're doing and what they need. Very few people had ever asked. And that is one of our biggest takeaways coming out of the pandemic, where, by the way, we still are severely understaffed in most early childhood systems across the country. And we just shouldn't be very surprised. So
I just want to add something there, which is Dr. Claudia Black, who is an expert on trauma in adults, says that there are 3 ground rules with which children are raised that are traumatized. Number 1, don't talk. Number 2, don't trust. And number 3, don't feel. And so I love the questions that Kate is asking. And what I want to do is step back and say, a lot of us, as trauma survivors, were taught not to feel. And how on earth can we be with children, which is a highly emotionally intelligent place? How can we be with children if we're out of touch with our own feelings? So what I'm hearing from Kate also is the gentleness that's required to take our broken hearts, take my broken heart, turn it into art in the following way. If I have been raised to think I'm inadequate, to think that my voice doesn't matter, to think that as a woman I can only do certain things, if suddenly someone's saying to me, how do I feel? I might do what a trauma survivor has been trained to do. I'm saying it's taken me years as an incest survivor in particular to be able to say, I am a survivor. I feel sad. It was wonderful when Fred Rogers was saying, what do I do with the sad that I have? What do I do with the mad that I have? What about those of us who were not allowed to have feelings? How can we work with children? And how does a child who's screaming possibly set us off as opposed to reminding us, I have skills? So this is a profound thing we're talking about. I want to thank Kate because the issues go deep. The issues go deep for people in our profession. And the deepness is, I need to look at myself and find myself acceptable, talented, skilled, able to learn. And what's very hard for that is the problem of trauma response. As you guys know, my brain, your brain, when under trauma, the executive function shuts down. That's the part of our brain that allows us to think straight and to see things and to have perspective. Shuts down by 90 to 95%. And all I can do is survive. And so if that's a constant challenge for early childhood professionals, what happens if we flatline, our brain flatlines? How can we have systems? I agree with Kate, we've got to look at the systems here. How can we have systems in place that allow trauma survivors, when traumatized in the classroom, to get help immediately and have support in their programs to get the help? And I want to add one more thing, which is that Nancy Rosenau, also in Nebraska, has done great work taking questions that are actually in my book for trauma survivors, taking those questions and inviting current professionals to look at those questions. How do you feel about, what's your experience with this? And do those in a safe environment. And also with the help of people who have retired, who have perspective on this. The last thing I want to say is when I interviewed one of the authors of the ACEs study, and I'm sure we'll talk about ACEs, but Dr. John Medina, I said to him, okay, John, what's the one thing you can advise us early childhood professionals? What's the one thing we need to do or provide children with to be helpful, useful, and true to ourselves, helping them? And I would ask you all that are listening, well, what's the one thing you feel we need to give or think we need to give to children? Be with children who are traumatized. My first response was unconditional love. I thought that was it. And you know what? In a heartbeat, Dr. John Medina said, safety. Children need safety first. And I have reflected on that for 20 years. How can I help people feel safe, help children feel safe, help myself feel safe? And I want to add one thing here because the conversation can be triggering. If you go online to trauma warm lines, almost every state has a trauma warm line. Now, this is not a hotline where you have to be in extremis to call in, but every state has a trauma warm line. Not every state, almost every state has a trauma warm line where I can call in. I've never done this, but I know people that have, and it really helps. Call in and say, I am at my wit's end. I am about to lose it. I am a trauma survivor. And the people who are listening are also trauma survivors, and they're trained as peer support. So if anything that's said during this is affecting people, know that you can immediately go to trauma warm lines. My just saying I'm an incest survivor can be very triggering. It's something I couldn't have said for the majority of my life, but now I say it because 1 out of every 3 women in the United States has been sexually molested.
Thank you so much, Kate, and hello, Elissa. I put the link to the warm line in the chat as well for everyone to look at. And it looks as though it is close to all 50 states, in a quick peek on that as well. One follow-up question I wanted to ask for you, Kate, is when we were working together, you were working on the Happy Teacher Project. And I know that the Happy Teacher Project is coming out of the University of Oklahoma. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that with us.
I'd be happy to. It's been a real privilege. You're right. We started collaborating with the folks here at Oklahoma. Oh, I guess maybe a couple of years ago, and Dr. Kyung-Ah Kwan, who is the inimitable, amazing director and conceiver of Happy Teacher Project, which began here at the Early Childhood Education Institute. She has been such an advocate while doing research in terms of pivoting quickly. So finding out how teachers are doing, what they need, and then pivoting very quickly to interventions. What are they saying they need? Trusting them, right? Trusting when they tell you what they need, trusting them and providing what they need. And so she and her team and a team of folks here have set up across the state relaxation and meditation rooms and early childhood programs. access to healthy snacks and exercise, supporting programs with breaks and substitute teachers to help with that. She, in collaborating with a team across the United States, have been working hard to develop an understanding of this whole ecosystem, right, of what it means to be well. Some things that have been really important about their findings, that I'm really optimistic about us learning more about is, we worry a lot about the developmentally appropriate things that are provided in early childhood classrooms. But Dr. Kyung-Ah Kwan and her team learned that there are almost no rules about what needs to be in a classroom to care for the adults. There are often no child-sized chairs. Changing tables are set at a standard height. And if you've ever raised a 40-pound wiggling preschooler onto one of those changing tables and felt your back twinge, okay? And so here we're leaving the trauma a little bit, but we're not, are we? We're saying what kinds of things in the environment are saying, I'm not safe, I'm not cared for, I'm caring for these little people and making sure they feel safe. Who's taking care of me? Where's my mask to put on before I put on the masks of the children, right? But using that mask in the airplane term, not the pandemic term, but we could go there too. We could talk about how am I taking care of the children and who's taking care of me in a pandemic or in the context of this caregiving situation. So another piece with the Happy Teacher Project that I think is really important is the idea that teachers do want compensation, but they go into the field knowing they're not getting paid well and they're not going to be a rich early childhood teacher. But if they are cared for and they are attended to and they are respected, they last longer, they do better, and they learn to become advocates for themselves. So the Happy Teacher Project has been one of a handful of these federally funded Administration for Children and Families funded Head Start University partnerships that is flying and helping our learning and landing on the answer. It's not about improving the teachers. It's not about the teachers muscling, because trauma survivors also muscle, don't we? We muscle through every trial and tribulation. It's not about the muscling. It's about the system coming forward and saying, we got you. You're safe with us. You are well cared for. I once worked with a really talented toddler teacher who'd been well trained in conscious discipline. And she was just a spectacular guide of young children's autonomy and competence. I loved watching her with twos and threes. But as I got to know her, I realized that she had some attachment issues. She had had a childhood where she had had to overperform for herself and her brother, as many children do. And so she had some issues of not feeling safe with the adults who cared for her and not feeling safe in general. And as our program would have it, she was to rotate around to teach the infants the next year. And I was a little concerned. I was a little concerned that she would hear the screaming infant who never slept as challenging her competence, her autonomy, and her safety. So I had some conversations with her, and they weren't easy. How does this, crazy professor director know that I have attachment issues, right? How does it? And so we talked it through. I told her that I saw her, that it was okay, but that she needed to know about herself. She needed to have the self-awareness that she might hear infants' pleas as criticism, right? As they might trigger her childhood experiences. I placed her with an assistant that was probably the most skilled interactor with children ever to hit the planet. And together, they rocked it the next year. There were bumps. There were bumps in which parents would come in and say, oh, my kid's not sleeping enough. You got to do this, this, and this, right? There were triggers for their safety. And I think we cannot hit the safety piece home hard enough, because unconditional love is essential for humans, but we can't define it very well. We come to the world ready to know safety and not safe. We are constantly looking around the room saying safe, not safe, safe, not safe, and going toward the safe. So Happy Teacher Project and the projects funded by the Head Start University Partnership, they're going to be releasing their findings this year, and it is transforming the way we understand the stress early childhood teachers experience and how supports are needed, not just improvement for them, but literally systemic improvement for their safety and well-being in our settings where we serve children and families. So they're amazing.
And
I want to
well,
add something
links-
to that, if I could. There's something that very few people know about, and I'm grateful for my time teaching for Wheelock College and with Gwen Morgan, who was one of the really brilliant people looking at systemic issues. And here's what Gwen helped me understand. Powerful systemic precedent set in World War II by the Kaiser centers. Kaiser centers, mostly on the West Coast, were funded by the government. Funded by the government because the people working there were preparing ships to go to war. And the Kaiser system treated early childhood professionals as if we were professionals. And they hired people from around the world. They flew them, around the country. They flew them in. They paid them well. They asked questions like, what is the best thing for children? And they had 24/7 care for children. They had doctors on site. They had shoelaces for children. They have haircuts for children. They had sick child care. And that's asking the question, what is best for children? But back to what Kate said. What is best for the adult? Because if the adult isn't doing well, nobody's doing well. No child can do well with an adult that's stressed and having a PTSD re-triggering. And so here's what came to mind and heart as Kate was talking. The Kaiser programs had these bathtubs so that every child could be bathed in a tub, except the tub was at adult level. So the child could climb up, get in the bathtub, and the adult was not straining her back. She was not suffering. And the message that program gave to adults in the room, to adult professionals, was you're professional. Your professional skills are respected. We are not just measuring intelligence by an IQ test. I mean, God knows this was before Dr. Howard Gardner, but we all have known that there are different types of intelligence, and an ability to be logical is only one tiny brand of that. I'm a recovering attorney. I can tell you that only prepared me for like 2% of, life at best. So what I want to say is there was a precedent with the government to fund early childhood well. And the great sadness is, once the trauma of the war was over, all of those centers gone. How can we recreate that system? It doesn't have to be founded from the beginning. There are all kinds of wonderful things that were in that precedent, and it was called the Kaiser precedent. I think that Gwen Morgan wrote about this for Childcare Exchange. I just want everybody to know that there have been bright moments when we have been recognized. We have been recognized for the wisdom that our profession requires.
Hey, Elissa, I have a question for you. One of the very first times I heard you present, you talked about 80%, 20%. 80% of early childhood educators are rule followers. 20% are trailblazers. And I have to say that I've shared this with you before, but it was the first time in my life I actually felt heard. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I really think it falls into this study of this conversation of we are more focused as educators on others than we are on our own needs. So could you talk a little bit more about that for our viewers, our participants?
That's a powerful question, and I'd be interested in what Kate has to say about this too, because what I know, this is based on Jungian work and lots of research with early childhood people using the Myers-Briggs. And what I know, the Myers-Briggs test indicator, what I know is that the majority of people who go into early childhood are people who want to be guardians of the past. They want to maintain things as they were and keep the best of things working. They want the trains to run on time. They want children to be clean. They want children to be fed. Those are all excellent kind of things. But the minority, actually, it's not such a minority. This is fascinating. The minority of people are the change agents, the ones who want to say, wait a minute, it's working, but that doesn't mean that that's enough. It's working. In many of the good centers around the country, it works that people are now paid better. They have, in some cases, retirement. This is healthcare. This is all really good. But what's not working are the deeper issues. And the deeper issues are, who on earth is esteemed for saying, I'm an infant teacher? Go out into the world and say, I'm an early childhood educator. Is what happens. When I wanted to change from being a traditional attorney, I did a lot of different things, but including being a consultant to several universities on leadership. And one of the things that happened was, after a while working in early childhood, I realized, as we all do, I wasn't making enough money, and my daughter was going off to an expensive college, and I had told her, Lily, you can go where you want, sweetie. And so I contacted a headhunter. And what happened? The headhunter said a lot of great stuff about my history, which is very flattering and helpful. But he said, take out all that stuff about early childhood. Take out everything you've put in there about your experience with early childhood. And I said, why? That's really powerful. Head Start's a great organization to work with. He said, people will laugh. People will laugh. And I said, thank you very much. I had a trauma response. I said, I'm done. I thank you so much for helping me, but I'm going to continue in early childhood. I'm going to take the vow of poverty, essentially. But what I'm saying here is, my friends, we're in a profession where there's a lot of silence about things that need to be said. Kate is talking about some of those. One of the other things that needs to be said is our status is at the bottom of educators. I taught at a community college as an associate professor and dean at a community college at the University of Maine. That had the lowest status in the University of Maine system. And yet, who were we helping? The people that were the future, the people that had already had life experience, that were leaders. So to answer your question, Holly, there will always be in early childhood change agents. And what I've come across anecdotally is that the majority of centers I've worked with around the country, programs, Head Start, have people who are not just the people, and thank God for them, that want to keep the trains running on time, want to keep everything clean. There also are many of us who want to make the system better and want to make it better for people. In fact, according to Jung, there are two temperaments here. One is the person who's a systems analyst, and that's great. That's very helpful. In early childhood, there are also people who want to make the systems better for people. You're one of those, Holly. I'm sure Kate is one of those too. And those are the people that are going to devote their lives to making a difference, regardless of how much money we're paid. I, however, maintain that we need to have wages that are appropriate to the difference that we're making.
I concur. Kate, what would you like to add to that?
I'm not familiar with the research on the personality dispositions of the workforce, of the people who become early childhood educators. But I want to weigh in on this prestige of teaching infants and toddlers. And I will say that, Holly, you and I have talked about this a little bit over the years.
Yes.
I graduated from a program also in Wisconsin, from a small university that recently closed. And Cardinal Stritch University, when you graduated with an early childhood and also special education degree, somehow I came out thinking the most important thing I could do in the world was teach infants and toddlers. And I'm not, I really believed that. I believed if I wanted to make not just a difference for children, but a difference in the world, that I would teach infants and toddlers. And we are faced, as you may know, with a crisis right now in recruiting people who want to educate infants and toddlers. And it's beyond the public school crisis. Even when we offer public school wages, as we do in some of the programs, the subsidized programs in Head Start and Early Head Start in Oklahoma, we still struggle to convince people that teaching young children and toddlers is where they want to be. And by the way, if anyone following this webinar wants to email me or reach out to me somehow with great ideas on recruiting the infant toddler workforce, I will be right back on there with you, because I am dying to let people know how wonderful it is to go into that career. And by the way, I too left the classroom so that I could support my children and send them to college, but still stay in early childhood, right? I did not want to leave early childhood, but I had to make some career pivots in order to have financial stability for my family. Makes me super sad that I had to do that, and I did. So how do we keep, and I wouldn't say I was a great teacher. I was a hardworking, good teacher, but I've seen great infant toddler teachers through the country. How do we keep them? How do we elevate them? How do we let the world know how they are changing the world every day? I would love for that campaign to be undertaken. We've spent a lot of time looking at brain cell development in children, which is so important. It's been so important to learn how children's brains develop. Now, let's focus on the people who interact with those young brains. Both, I would say, both family members and early childhood professionals and other health and welfare professionals who work with this population, home visitors, et cetera. How do we elevate the importance and esteem of what they do and how they are changing the world, and understand the kind of emotional supports and health supports they need to do that work? Teaching toddlers is physically grueling. I used to take pride at being able to carry multiples of them down the hallway at one time, right? How do we, I could never do that today. We elevate this? I would love ideas and love to know more, because this is where we need to be right now.
Well, as Kate knows very, very well, the proudest part of my resume was being an infant area coordinator for the University of Minnesota. I had to take a $20,000 pay cut to do this. And I will always be grateful to my daughter's father for giving me the gift of 4 years of being a baby, a baby whisperer. And Kate also knows that I would more than happily join that research project. I'd probably do it for free. So, we have a question in the Q&A, and I wanted to ask it because it applies to right now. From Lori Chimento, can you speak to ways that you suggest change makers in early childhood education maintain their purpose and passion while avoiding compassion fatigue and burnout?
I have a response to that, and it comes in part supported by Dr. Judith Herman. Dr. Judith Herman is an innovator when it comes to trauma and adults, and she wrote a book called, if I don't lose it right now, Trauma and Recovery. And here's what she said, and I have put this out there whenever I can. She said, trauma survivors have remarkable creative capacities. Remarkable creative capacities. Honey, when I look at the ACEs study, I can get very angry. And by the way, as a person who's a trauma survivor, I was not allowed to get angry. So now when I say I can get angry and I know what to do with the mad that I have, I'll tell you what I do with this. I advocate strongly for the strengths and the talents and the skills of people who are trauma survivors. Now, the ACEs study is going to tell us, and if you're not familiar with the ACEs study, I would say very briefly, it was a wonderfully longitudinal study that essentially said to us, if there are factors that we have in our childhoods, early childhoods, they will affect us negatively for the rest of our lives. And you can go online and there's a 10-question test and find out where you are on that. I have 8 on that, which is very high. And what does that mean? It means that I should be dead. I'm going to be 79 years old this month. I should be dead. I have a sister who died of an autoimmune disease. I had 2 heart surgeries. Why am I saying this? Because the ACEs study predicts that we will have cancer more likely than other people. We will have broken relationships more likely than other people that weren't trauma survivors. We will not be able to maintain jobs. We will be depressed. We will be, it's like endless. And one time I was the ending keynote at a conference in Texas, and the beginning keynote was a neuroscientist. And his point was, we have got to get to these children when they're young, because if not, they will be, I hate this phrase, I get very angry about it, they will be broken for life. I am not broken. I'm a survivor. The children that come to us who are beaten, who are the people pleasers, because people like John Bradshaw said, watch out for those children that are the people pleasers, because they're the ones that are not being taken care of at all. They just know how to take care of adults. Anyway, the point is this: the ACEs study tells us, rightfully so, to focus on early childhood education, because we need to help children start recovering then and build the strengths and the skills for life. However, at any age, people can heal. Mm-hmm. And that's what's crucial about early childhood. We have a workforce of trauma survivors who can be remarkable change agents, because we know what it's like to have been traumatized. And so we know when a child comes in, let's help the child breathe. Let's blow out the candle, but first, let's smell the roses. All of these things that we can do as adults. I'm talking about this because Dr. Judith Herman is saying to us, and this, I'm going to get back to your question, Holly. What Dr. Herman is saying to us is, wait a minute, and I want to say this to Kate too, and everybody listening. What do we already have in early childhood that means that we can change the world? I'm not just talking about in our field. I came to the field because I said, wait a minute, I want to be in a place where people are making a difference. They're making a difference on earth. Mm-hmm. So what I have, my proposal is, those of us, which is the majority of us, who are trauma survivors and early childhood professionals, how can we take our broken heart and turn it into art? Or more specifically, how can we get the help we need to translate our pain and our wounds into healing for the children, for the families, and for ourselves? And that's what is, I'm glad to hear some of the things going on, but that needs to be far wider, far more widespread. And Holly, for the change agents, honey, anything you do in your program to see each child as she is and respect that child will change that child's life. You change the life of one traumatized child, you change the world. And if you set up a system in your program, in your classroom, where children are seen Children are heard. And here's the third thing that doesn't happen with traumatized children. Children are believed. Children are believed.
Mhm.
I'm going to give you one example, then I'm going to end with this. But I was talking with a person who went, as many of us do, from being a teacher to being a director because she needed to survive financially. But she told me as a teacher, she had a child who was a refugee who learned English so rapidly. In a supportive environment, children learn and learn rapidly. After about 5 months with this child, he came to her and he said to her, "Teacher, this might sound violent, so I just want to warn people. Teacher, you have a knife in your brain, just like I have one in my brain, don't you?" Now, how would you respond to that? And how would you respond if you're a trauma survivor? I tell you, my first response was mandated reporter. And then I heard that alarm and I said, let it go. I have time. So I asked her, what did you do? And what she did was beautiful. And it's about your question, Holly, but how can we make a change every day in honoring the children who need to be seen, heard, and believed? She said to this this 4.5-year-old boy, she said, I'll call him Peter. So Peter, she said, thank you so much for noticing. I have a headache today. And it was a very creative way you described it. I do feel like I never thought of it that way, but it does feel like someone punched something in my brain. And I just, I'm so glad that you could say that to me. And it really helps me. And you know that I've been sharing with the class that my mother is ill and she's probably going to have to live someplace else. I won't be able to live with her anymore. And I feel sad about that. And that's part of why I have a headache today. And now, Peter, you don't have to share if you don't want to. But I heard you also say you feel like you have a knife in your brain. And I've just told my aide, our wonderful aide, Susanna, to watch out for everybody. So you and I can have a conversation here if you want to have one. Would you like to share with me why you feel you have a knife in your brain? I believe you, and I'd like to hear more about it. Now, that encounter right there is a change to that child's life. And that child may go on to be a teacher, may go on to be a psychiatrist, may go on to be a person who cleans drains or something. But that person will remember somebody saw me. Somebody saw me. And when I look at the United States right now, not to go political, but I think if people felt seen, heard, believed, we might not have as many challenges as we have right now. So I want to say to everybody working in this profession, you are making a difference. I'm coming from this high-powered attorney, assistant attorney general, copyright attorney, and I can tell you, I never felt I was making the difference there that I am here. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. Kate, what wisdom do you have to add?
Hard to add beyond that, but thank you, Holly, Lisa. I want to go back to this discussion of ACEs just for a second, because you talked about what's it going to take to start this groundswell of expectation, this groundswell of we don't like to use the word demand in our highly feminized field, but what if we said demand? How do we build this groundswell? When we were doing our first study with a group of Head Start teachers and asking about their well-being, we wanted to ask about ACEs. And it also occurred to us that in the context of a survey that we didn't want to be too long, we didn't want to trigger people too much. And so we knew the ACEs questionnaire can be very triggering. Putting it in the context of other questions can be, we thought that might be experienced as disrespectful. So we found a version of the ACEs in which the most commonly attributed high impact traumas were listed, and then invited the educators completing the the survey to look down the list and indicate how many they had experienced. So instead of endorsing specific, they could just endorse they were almost giving an intensity number, right? How many did you experience? And we sent the survey out, and we sent it out to the directors so that they could distribute it, and it would come back anonymously to us from their staffs. And one director called and said, I don't wanna include these questions. They talk about, sexual abuse. They talk about hurting. And I don't think we should be asking people that. It will make them uncomfortable. I said, so I hear you. I hear you, because it's very uncomfortable to ask people about their pain. And I will tell you that most people who've experienced this pain, like some of these, are aware of it on a daily basis. They already have lived. Every day they remind themselves about controlling the effects of their pain on their interactions with other people, right? So this is already part of them. And people who haven't experienced that are certainly going to be uncomfortable. And I'd argue that, whoa, good for them to know that this is common, that this is regular. So I'm going to encourage you to do it. To let us do this. And so we talked a while. She was uncomfortable, but we did include it in her survey as well as the others. And as I mentioned earlier, we found extraordinarily high rates of single traumas was close to a little above average than the general population, but multiple experiences of childhood trauma was experienced by well over 40% of the people who answered the survey. And so we said, first of all, thank goodness we did that, that we asked. So what we need to, circling back around, what we need to have space for is the space for this to be okay to talk about, for the space not to be seen as broken. We used to have something that said, that saying, that's which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I wouldn't go so far. Sometimes it just kills you, okay? Sometimes it just takes you down. However, in the context of good relationships, good healthcare, and access and opportunity to good choices, people who've experienced trauma are as healthy or sometimes healthier than the general population. Part of my research was about temperament in my early work. And in one piece we found, as we suspected, that children who were more irritable, according to their mothers in infancy, had better outcomes than their temperamentally easy peers in the context of sensitive, responsive parenting. With the right experiences, with the right access to quality experiences, early childhood teachers are better for having experienced pain. Children who experience pain can be better as adults, healthier, and contribute more, provided they get the interactions and environments that support them in their development. So it's not that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's that in the context of being held safely and treated well, your adversity can be transformed into a superpower. And I think I got that from Holly, Elissa, from your work. I've been reading you lately. So I'm seeing and hearing that message that you've been bringing to us. So.
Thank you. And I'm going to just say a really brief story about this. I was teaching for Wheelock College in Singapore and having a wonderful time. And I got something called SARS. It's that awful respiratory illness, and I had to be hospitalized. And as I was hospitalized, as an advocate for myself, I said to the doctors, this was at the best hospital in Singapore. I said, I want you to know that I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which means that if you do certain things with me to my body without telling me, I could have an instant response. So please, I need two things. Tell me everything in advance and give me the time. There was a whole fleet of the other people. It was a teaching hospital. And you know what? I became really good friends with that doctor. He said, I wish everybody would talk with me like that, say what they need. But here's the point. Came back from that entourage with him, came back a woman with her white coat on, and she said, she stood looking at me, and I'm in my bed, and she said, you know, we have a locked ward in this hospital for people with post-traumatic stress disorder. You are the first person I've ever heard say out loud, you have it. And I got right away what I had to do. I said, if you're comfortable, please sit down. Let's have a conversation. And I told her about my lifetime of learning that my trauma was indeed my strength. Indeed, if I looked at it rather than running from it, it would inform my whole life. And I said, I have learned, speak up, speak out, tell the truth without blaming or shaming, take responsibility, and ask for what I need. And that's what I'm doing here. And frankly, if I hadn't asked for what I needed, I would not have even been able to do the neti pot that I'm trying to learn, because anything, the sexual abuse had a lot to do with my upper body. And I'm not, don't tell me to put a tube up my nose. No, but by asking for help and by telling the truth, I'm able. And that's what I'd love to see in early childhood. I would love to see a teacher be able to say, I need help. When Jasmine screams, I can't help but remember I was smacked across the face for screaming. And I get to a point where I can't think straight. I need help with that. Well, great. Bring in conscious discipline. Bring in the help. So I believe, honestly, not only do early childhood professionals deserve high status, the people who are trauma survivors, the majority of us, deserve to be credited for the skills and the strengths we bring to relationships. Relationships are not easy. Nothing has been safe. We have to find ways of safety. I do a podcast weekly with my colleague who's a trauma survivor, 32 years teaching Head Start. She said, Holly, Elise, and really like me, a severe trauma survivor, she said, every day that I went into my Head Start classroom, I had a happy childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Not at the expense of those children, but as they were having fun, I was having fun. As they were learning, I was learning. And then she became a coach to other people because she took her broken heart, turned it into art.
Mm-hmm.
That's the strength.
I cannot thank the two of you enough for today. It has been such an honor and a privilege to hear your wisdom and have you share your stories with us. I'm going to cry. So thank you. This webinar was a gift for me to have the two of you here today. And I wish both of you a wonderful remainder of your 2024. And we will be back with our early efforts webinar in February 2024. And we're going to be talking about kindergarten readiness. Are the schools ready for our children? Have an
Thank you so
amazing
much.
day.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much,
Thank
Kate
you.
and Holly and everybody.
Thank you, Holly, Elissa, and thank you, Holly, for bringing us all together, and Christy for